What do you mean by fodder? Was the first thing that comes to your mind on hearing the word. That is the impact of a scam in India. This is the first episode of the top Indian scams brought to you by Economy Sam, where the major scams that rocked India are covered. All content submissions in the series are either based on data available on the public domain or collected from various platforms that are hypothetically relied upon. The purpose of the series is to promote by all means truth alone triumphs, or Satyameva Jayate, and not to promote occurrence of any scams. Through this series, we don't intend to either demonize or condemn or pass judgment on those who've been involved, but only to try and create awareness of how some people can find loopholes and misuse the laws of the land and use our gullibility for selfish benefit. Some of them do it just for the money, some for the power, and some just because they think that no one would notice anyway. Fodder refers to agricultural foodstuff used specifically to feed domesticated livestock such as cattle, rabbits, sheep, horses, and pigs. In this case, many renowned politicians consumed fodder, or at least the funds that were supposed to be used to buy fodder with. Let me explain it to you. If you have to feed, say, 20 people, how much food would you order? Enough for about 25 at most, in case of unexpected guests, I suppose. I mean, after all, that's the basic norm to ensure that no one goes back hungry. Now imagine how it'd be if you ordered for food for a whole lot of imaginary guests. Well, that's exactly what happened in the state of Bihar under the aegis of not just an ex chief minister, but also a serving CM. The number of people involved in the scheme of things included many other elected representatives, bureaucrats, and businessmen. The entire scam lasted for a couple of decades and was so magnanimous with not just the number of people, but also the profile of people involved that it is still covered by most media even today. With one of the chief orchestrators still behind bars on multiple charges, reports on the scam and its proceedings still make it to the front page news, although it was first reported over 20 years ago. Now, what scam are we talking about? I'm sure you might have guessed it by now. We're talking about the Ford scam and how Lalu Prasad Yadav managed to pull the entire thing off. Aptly called the Ford scam, it was simple and it involved the animal husbandry department. You know the one we're talking about. The department that is supposed to be taking care of all those animals we just spoke about, the livestock, and since it involves animals, well, yes, they need to eat and at times even given medicines. Now, let's just assume that you have 10 animals. You're supposed to order food and medicines for just those 10 animals, isn't it? Well, that's not what Bihar believed in. On paper, the number of animals were escalated and food and medicines procured according to the numbers mentioned on paper. Any living creature, even animals, reproduce and die. To keep the numbers growing, well, that's another simple game. The birth rate just has to be more than the mortality rate, at least on paper. What happens in actuality is another matter altogether. The scam started off small and was mostly low level government employees that were involved initially. However, it soon grew into epic proportions with businessmen, politicians, and bureaucrats jumping into the game. It was soon evident that anyone who was involved was a part of the animal husbandry mafia. How much was the scam worth eventually? If we go into the records, the amount that was embezzled ran to the tune of 950 crore rupees. You may say that isn't much given the values of some of the scams that have been unearthed recently, but remember, we're talking about figures from 1996 when the scam was first unearthed. Now, how did they get found out? Well, like most other scams, the stakeholders, or let's just say scamsters, had a good run while it all lasted. But somehow, someone either became complacent or intentionally started delaying the submission of the Animal Husbandry Department monthly account statements. It's also possible that with so much money flowing, the people in the account section were flummoxed and just found it next to impossible to fudge the data on time. The Comptroller and Auditor General of India, better known as CAG or CAG, became suspicious and warned that there was a possibility of money laundering. And this was way back in 1985. Despite continuous reminders, the government of Bihar chose to ignore them all. The Bihar Veterinary Association, called the BVA, in a press meet the same year, also exposed the animal husbandry mafia. After the press meet, the mafia managed to install one of their own into the BVA as a general secretary, thus ensuring that they could continue embezzling amounts from the department without any fear. In 1992, a police inspector from the state's anti corruption unit submitted a report on the fodder scam and the likely involvement of the CM's office. He was rewarded by being transferred to another department and eventually suspended. Although he was reinstated later, well, that's another story. In the meanwhile, a few ex office bearers of the BVA managed to gather more evidence and submitted them to other politicians. Also, the then Finance Commissioner found massive financial anomalies in the Animal Husbandry Department and in 1996 directed all district magistrates and deputy commissioners to check cases of excessive withdrawals from the department. To cut a long story short, raids were conducted all over the place and an inquiry into withdrawals of large sums of money by the husbandry department were made. With all the incriminating evidence that was gathered, the case was finally handed over to the CBI just so that the state police could not tamper with the investigation. The investigation proceeded, and in 1997, the CBI sought the Bihar governor's permission to prosecute the serving CM Lalu Prasad Yadav. The CM, along with 55 others, were arrested and charged on 63 counts, with all of them related to forgery, criminal conspiracy, and prevention of corruption. In 1998, a case of disproportionate assets was also registered against him, with his wife being named as a co accused for abetment of crime. The IT department said that Lalu Prasad had gathered 46 lakhs from the government treasury. As per the charge sheet, Lalu Prasad Yadav managed to fraudulently withdraw 33 crore rupees from the district animal husbandry department. Lalu Prasad Yadav, one of the most charismatic leaders in the Indian political scenario, is still behind bars on different counts, though he has been contesting most of the cases which are still sub judice. However, it just goes to show how greed and unwillingness to do the right thing can lead to the downfall of even some of the most powerful and charismatic people. Our intention is to make people aware of how yours and our hard earned money that we pay our taxes with can be misused and how that also impacts the economic development of our proud nation, while just a few unscrupulous elements benefit from it all. Stay tuned for more scams that rock the nation and, in some cases, brought down some of the most powerful people involved. My name is Abhijit, and I've been your host for this program. See you soon with more.